Being a Fujifilm shooter, I'm of course drawn to their built-in film simulations, along with the recipes that are created by the community. However, the reason I tend to unfortunately stay away from using them is because shooting in a film simulation mode bakes in that look, which gives me a lot less control over my image. But there's no way to really add back that film simulation in a camera like you can if you shoot raw stills. I prefer to capture as unprocessed of an image as I possibly can with my cameras, so I end up sticking to F-Log2 with my X-S20. But I still want a way to get these stylized looks from the video like I can with the film simulations without having to do a bunch of work in Resolve. So, when the Dehancer team reached out to me regarding making a review video about their plugin Dehancer Pro, I was absolutely on board because it seemed like a potential solution to my dilemma. And now, having had used the plugin for about a month and getting to properly learn it, I can confidently say that the team really did accomplish their goal and create a plugin that not only makes grading easier for me, but has given me a lot more customization than the Fujifilm film simulations that I was trying to replicate. All of the footage in this video was graded with Dehancer using a variety of their emulated film stocks and settings, and with a few different cameras footage to get a proper idea of how it works. And if you want to pick up your own copy of Dehancer, you can use code RyanCaboose to get 10% off the price. After this, I'll also be walking through how I grade my clips step by step, and I'll explain the different options in Dehancer along the way. Overall, I have to say that I am very pleased with the workflow and the results I'm getting. But, as with anything, I do of course have a couple things to note. To me, the biggest drawback by far with Dehancer is the performance slowdown when using it. I want a relatively decent machine with an i9-13900H, RTX 4060 and 32GB of RAM, DDR5, but using Dehancer requires me to drop my timeline resolution to a quarter quality, and sometimes even that isn't enough to get smooth playback if I enable additional options like halation or bloom. Now that of course can be solved with a GPU upgrade, although pretty expensive. Another small thing that I have to note is that certain cameras or profiles are still not available to select, such as in my case the Fujifilm X-S20. So whenever I'm grading these clips from my Fujifilm X-S20, I've ended up just selecting the X-H2S as it's similar enough, though of course there are slight differences and I do hope that they add that in the future with an update. That is one of the great things about Dehancer, they are constantly updating the plugin, and so new cameras and profiles are added all the time, such as the Sony A1 II that came out most recently. So I think the best way of showing how Dehancer works and why I like using it is to just get in a Davinci Resolve project and grade some of my footage. So what I've done here is just dragged in a couple of clips from my Fujifilm X-S20 and also from the Sigma FP, some in anamorphic, some with spherical lenses, and shot in Cinema DNG for the FP, H.265, and also a Blackmagic RAW clip. So I'll begin with an H.265 clip from the camera, shot in its log profile, in this case F-Log2, because that is what most people are going to be shooting. So if I drag in Dehancer here, you'll see the very first option right at the top is the source. And so what you do here is you choose the source gamma and the source color gamut that you're coming from. Usually I do tend to have my timeline in Davinci Wide Gamma Intermediate, so if I'm shooting raw footage, I will use that option. But another great option, and what I would actually recommend, is if you're shooting in log, go to the choose camera option, choose your camera vendor, so Fujifilm, and you'll see that you can just choose a camera and its log profile, and it will directly do the transform for you, including the gamma adjustments. It'll do the curves for you, and so you don't have to really do that much work, which I think is great because I prefer this to using the manufacturer LUTs. I find that at least the Fujifilm manufacturer LUTs aren't really great, and sometimes I don't really want to do all the manual tweaking, having to do curves, add a bit of contrast, so on and so forth. So this is nice and easy. Unfortunately, they don't actually have a profile for this camera specifically, the X-S20, but I'm going to choose the X-H2S because it's close enough. It's the same log profile, after all, same processor, so it shouldn't be that different. Let's pretend it's an X-H2S for this. Then we have the second most important option in Dehancer, which is the film stock. And of course, that's the whole point of the plugin. So I'll go through some of my favorite ones, being Cinestill 50D, Fuji Chrome Pro Veil 100, Fuji Color 100, Kodak Gold 200, which I think is what I'm going to use for this scene, and finally Kodak Porta 400 is also one of my favorites. So I'll start with Gold 200, and I'll just do an introduction to all the Dehancer controls, starting here at the top with the exposure compensation, temperature compensation, tint compensation. So these controls are mostly identical to the ones we have here in the primaries for the color wheels, so your tint, color temperature. There is an additional control for fringing, but that's honestly not something I tend to really touch. Then the film stock again, and you can emulate pushing and pulling it. Not something I usually do as well. I tend to push and pull with the film developer options here, which is what I'll get into next. So the film developer options are very, very useful if you're coming from a raw file. So as you can see, for example, with this, if I don't have a curve on it, it is very flat and needs some saturation and contrast added into it badly. And so you can do it in DaVinci here, or we can do that in Dehancer, which is what I'll do for raw videos. Then you can also change the gamma correction, and color boost, which is similar to the color boost option here in the primaries. But if you just want to do everything in one plugin on one node, it's a useful option. So I think we should boost it a little bit here just to get that kind of warm blue and orange contrasting look here. Same with the contrast. We can boost it up in this way or down in this way. Now what I think I'll do is I'll boost the contrast up and then turn the gamma down. So I think that's already making a bit of a difference. I think it looks great. Next, we have the film compression. So again, a useful option. And you have the impact control, which changes, I guess, kind of the mix. So whether it's making a big difference, 100%, or making no difference at 0. And you have the controls for your white point, tonal range, which is, again, an important one if you're working with raw footage, but can also really change the look even just doing with log here. You can see the difference that makes. It is pushing the colors down a bit. You can see mainly in the blue here. The blue is becoming much darker, and the orange that was reflecting off of the sun is becoming more clear. Then we have the color density, which is similar to a color boost, but works in a different way. And you can see we're really boosting the orange and red nature of the image here. And difference with it off to on, you can see really brings out the contrast in the colors, which I like. Then this control here, expand. So you'll notice that not necessarily this film stock, but some film stocks, their dynamic range is a bit limited. And so what the controls for the white point and black point let you do is expand the range of the film past what you normally would have. So you can see if I bring the white point down, it expands it upwards. If I bring the black point up, it expands it downwards. And so this is a way of adding additional contrast. And you can change the color mode between normal and luma, which is just a different way of processing it. I do use it a lot, especially with certain film stocks. Not so much this one, but Fuji Color, I do have to use it a good bit. Then we can change the print. So normally you want to do this in linear profile, but they do also have film print and Cineon film log if you are looking for a different kind of look. So you can see if we're printing to Kodak Endura glossy paper, gives a different appearance from just linear. I do actually like the way the Kodak Endura glossy paper looks on this, so I think I'll leave it on. And again, we have another more different tonal contrast control, and also a place to push up or down your exposure, and then saturation control. And there is also an analog range limiter, and as you can see, this will squish the image down. I think I like it with it off more, at least for this shot. Next, we have our color head options. And so the reason why these are very important is because you have the ability to control the warmness or coolness of the image in the shadows, midtones, and highlights separately. And so you can see, even though I'm adjusting this control all the way left or all the way right, it's not affecting the whole image, just certain portions. So this is adding a lot more of a cool tone to the water specifically. And then the highlights, you can see the top is what really changes. We can make it very, very blue compared to what it was before, or we can really accentuate that orange color, which I think works well for this shot, so I will leave it pretty high on the highlight tone. Then the midtones, again, we can force more orange, more blue color. I think in this case, we want it a bit of orange. And then the shadows, I think I'm going to leave as more blue just to give some of the contrast between the blue color in the water and the orange color in the sky. Maybe not that extreme, more of, yeah, about right there. And then also we have the options of yellow, blue shifting, magenta, green shifting, or cyan, red shifting the whole scene. Now in this case, I already like what the colors look, so I think I'm going to pretty much leave these unchanged. You can also gang them together. And you'll see now this kind of changing the hue of the whole image, going from more green tint, or kind of magenta, purple, red, pink. Next, we have the all-important film grain option. Now, I tend to shoot my Fujifilm footage with sharpness and noise reduction all the way off. And so, if you look, there is already some noise here present, because I don't denoise my images usually. But if you want to add more noise, or film grain, then you can easily do that with this option. And you can see the difference that makes, and also the difference that choosing a different size of film makes. So between super 8mm, you can see the large amount of noise, and it's also a lot less fine. You know, with 65mm at ISO 50, very, very fine noise. You can see it's almost like there is none. And you can also increase the amount of it. And you also have the ability to completely customize it. If you don't like any of the preset options, you have full control over how much noise there's in the shadows, midtones, highlights, whether it's negative or positive type, analog or noise, and size, resolution, so on and so forth. I tend to leave it in 35mm ISO 50. Just to add a little bit noise, take the edge off, but nothing too crazy. Then halation. So halation is, it's not super obvious in this scene because there isn't a lot of sharp, high contrast. It's a lot more obvious with the Blackmagic RAW. So what I'll do is let me drag Dehancer into this Blackmagic RAW clip, and I will just quickly show you what the halation looks like. So if I go to an area of contrast, such as right here, and I enable it, you can immediately see that there is kind of a reddish glow coming from that area. You see all around the image, anywhere that there's contrast, like right at this edge, the reddish glow comes out. And again, same options for the size of the film. And also you have an additional option for no remjet, and you can see that really accentuates the effect even more than usual. And again, ability to fully customize it if you don't like any of the preset options. Then I'll stay here as well to talk about the bloom. And you can see what bloom does is a similar effect to using a Tiffin Black Pro Mist or Glimmer Glass filter on the front of your lens. It blooms out the whole image, and it gives a more soft, dreamy type of appearance, which can be good in some cases. I do like using it usually when I'm going for a film look. And again, same sort of options, film size, or if you want to go crazy, completely customize it. There's also a mask mode option, so if you wanted to see where it's adding the halation, you can see that right here. And the changes that doing the custom controls makes, you can see that. Okay, now we can go back to the clip I was working on. Next, we have the film damage option. And if we enable that, well, I think you get it from the name. You can see what effect it has to the whole image. adds the film damage appearance of the black and white spots and streaks and so on and so forth. Again, same controls for the size, 65, 35, 16:8, or completely customizing, go crazy. This one has an insane amount of options that I haven't even dived into. I'll leave it on 35. Then we have film breathe, which might not be super obvious on this scene. I think it's more obvious with the Blackmagic RAW, so let's go back to it. Film breathe, I'll put it on 8mm. And you can see what it does if you look over here in the shadows. You have kind of a pulsing effect with the color, which if I turn it off, is not there. And you can see this happens throughout the scene. It's just a lot more obvious in the shadows area. And since we don't have too many dark shadows here, it's not something that's super noticeable. So I usually don't leave stuff on if it's not something that's going to make a huge difference. Like in that scene, I would leave it on, but in this sunset, I would leave it off. Then we have gate weave, which you can see does crop the image in a slight bit. And the reason for that is because it emulates analog film weaving. And so you can see if I find a spot that should be static, like right here, and I put it on 8mm, impact all the way up, you can see that the film starts kind of shaking in place to imitate that gate weaving look. And you can also see that in the waveform down here. So it does really give it the kind of look that you're going for, mainly with Super 8 films, I think, rather than 35, Super 35, or 65mm large format. This is something I do see a lot more on Super 8, so I think this is an effect that if you're kind of going for that low-budget camcorder, modern camcorder look. Not something I use very often, but the option is there if you're looking for it. Then the overscan, which is a fun option. Not something I use very much, again, but it's fun. So if we enable the overscan, you can immediately see the difference that it makes to the image. If I just boost the exposure up, you'll see that it now shows the overscanned area of the image as well. Because normally, whenever you see a film print being taken into digital, the corners, the perforations in the edge here are cropped out. But if you wanted to bring them back and lose some of your field of view, you can always do that. And you can change the type of overscan between Super 8, 16mm, Super 16mm, Ultra Panavision even. And you can see that the difference that these make. You can also flip it around, change the offset, various options like that. And then the final option that you have in terms of customizing your appearance of your image is to add a vignette. So let me turn off the overscan and enable the vignette. And you can see the kind of difference that this makes. And you can change the center of the vignette. So in this case, it's centered around the top left, but I can move it around by just clicking and dragging. So if I want it in the top right, or more likely you want it in the middle, change the aspect ratio of the circle and the feather of the mask. And again, mask mode will just show you the mask. And then we have the last couple of options. So we have the ability to look at a false color representation, clipping indication, which will show either shadow or highlight clipping. In this case, I just have a bit of shadow clipping because I did push those sections down. Then you have this total mix slider, which let me turn the vignetting off, which you can see changes the total impact from back to our unmodified log footage all the way to our finished and graded clip. And then last but not least, we have the ability to generate a LUT for this. And so if I really like this look and I didn't want to just right click, grab still, save it as a power grade or still to use in the rest of the project, you can also just save it as a LUT directly and then have it as an option, not just in the NLE that you're editing in currently, but if you want to, for example, put it in Premiere Pro later, you have the option of saving it as a LUT. And so that concludes this video. I did just want to put something out while I'm still working on my XS20 review, but that is taking a bit longer than expected, but I do hope that it'll turn out a lot better than the first time I shot it last week. And so I hope to have that out by the end of the year, and that'll be definitely at least a 30-minute long video, very in-depth with lots and lots of footage, some of which you did see in the intro of this video. And so thank you for watching.